Agree.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, it's going to be quick because they told me it was going to be quick. So this is a subject that could go for 2 days or 10 minutes. We're getting the 10-minute version. We want to cover some of the basics, some of the things where we can get into hazardous situations, talk a little bit about what the bandsaw can do, talk a little bit about what we have. In the shop we have 3 different categories of bandsaws. We have the resaw bandsaw, which has a 1-inch wide blade. For straight cuts only, we're trying to resaw wood, take wide pieces, make them narrow. Why would you want to do that? Well, if you have a wide board and you want to make 2 boards and you do that, that's fine. But another thing that gets overlooked a lot would be to make veneers to put on things. Say you have a very expensive piece of wood, really beautiful. This isn't beautiful, but pretend it is. And you're making a dresser and you have a series of drawers in there. I can make all the drawer fronts out of one board. If I resaw it, make it thin, I can take the pieces so I can have the grain one from one side to the other, up and down, everything matches. It really adds a lot to fine furniture when you do stuff like that. So I would make a thin piece of veneer. Veneer can be 1/4 inch or less generally. And then I would attach this, glue it onto another piece of board, probably the same species, but maybe not as nice, or even a different species. And so you see the front and it can do. So when you're designing things, think about stuff like that. The second class is the ones that get used the most, and that's the ones that we keep a 1/4 inch blade on. And that's for during cutting curves and small pieces and stuff like that. It gets used a lot. We keep a 1/4 inch blade on it. If you have a bandsaw at home, you probably have multiple different blades. You might have a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch, and maybe a 3/4 to do resaw. But we're keeping 1/4 inch here because it serves our purpose. The last one we have is the bandsaw that we can put the real fine blades the same as a scroll saw. There's a video, if you go to YouTube, search on SDFWA, what's the name? Pegas bandsaw. There's a 1/2 inch video that was done here, and it's very good, gives a lot of information. So if you're looking for real fine scroll work and stuff, it goes into it quite a bit. Before we get going, I want to see, go down, the one right there. Okay, I want to put that slide up. Okay. So I have a question. This is the first getting into some of the safety factors. The question I have for you is, are you fast enough? Just think, I'm getting old, not as fast. If you're young, you may be a little faster, but are you fast enough? So let's take a look. We have our typical cat dealing with a rattlesnake. I'm not that fast, it would have got me. But here's the slow motion. So the cat was actually able to react, not only jump back, but it could take its paws and do that. It's kind of an analogy to what can happen in woodworking and machinery. The rattlesnake is that piece of wood that you decide to do and don't quite want to put the safety things in and do different things and that, because when stuff happens, you don't have time. It's going to get you. You go and you push something in, and you say, well, I should have a clamp on that, but I'm not going to because I don't have time. When something happens, you don't have the reaction time not to get hurt. So don't put yourself in a position where you're trying to react and you can't do it. I have a chisel, got a piece of wood. that slips, you don't have time. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we have to have a bandsaw. Just happen to have one with a small blade on it. You'll notice the blade cuts down. The thing about cutting down is that it forces the wood against the table, which is really helpful. We want to keep our hands away from pushing right into the blade, so first thing we do is we put the blade guard down. So we have a lot less of the blade showing. So it's kind of makes sense when you're cutting. If I'm cutting this, I'm going here. It makes sense. I'm not going to put my thumb here and push through, because once it gets to the end, it generally goes much quicker, and you're not going to have time to react. You're not the cat. So you're going to have it, and you're going to go off to the side. Makes perfect sense. Here's where it gets a little more complicated. I'm making a curve. I'm coming in, I'm rotating, my hand's not in front of the blade. I go, I rotate, guess what? My hand is now in front of the blade. I started over here, I rotated. Because I didn't move my hand, I'm still in front of the blade. So if you're cutting curves and you're coming through and you don't move, you're going to cut right into your hand. So you've got to really be careful with your hand position. That's one of the key things, is keeping your hand position away from the direct cut of the blade. That blade goes, and blades are dumb. They don't care if it's a piece of wood or you. I asked them, they said no. Okay. We talked about the blade cutting down, forcing the wood on here. One of the nice things is that if I'm cutting this wood and I go in here and I go in, the wood's going to stay here if I stop pushing. It's not like a table saw or something with a circular blade that's coming towards you. It's going to stay there, so you can go and stop it, and it'll stay, which is a really nice thing, which really makes it more safer than certain things like table saw. But say I'm doing this, I'm not doing a through cut, and I want to come out. We want you, in fact, we require you, turn off the machine, wait for it to stop, and then pull it out. There's a couple reasons for that. First, if you start pulling that out, we have a thin blade on the ones with a 1/4 inch. There's a high likelihood you're going to pull it out of the blade guides, and the blades are going to go and get wonky and not wear things, and you have a chance of breaking it. So that's one of the main things. When you're pulling stuff out from here, avoid turning the wood, catching the blade, and twisting the blade. You have a guide right there. If you twist that wood, you're going to put a kink in the blade, and you're going to ruin the blade. And you're going to turn it on, and you're going to hear click, click, click. If you hear the click, turn off the bandsaw. It means it's going to break real soon. And bandsaw blades will break. Okay. Small things. Try to use things like clamps. Use paddles. Use certain things. Keep your hands away from the blade. If I'm doing a resaw, I told you it's going to be quick. I put my resaw fence up here. I'm cutting here. I've got a couple things I can do. I can take this wood and I can push it through, maybe. Let's use a taller blade, it stays better. I'm pushing it through. We've got it set. I'm just doing some narrow work. I'm cutting this through. I can guide it through here like this. There's a couple ways I can do that. I can take, when it gets down here, I can take a paddle. I don't want to be pushing here with my hand. Obvious reasons, I want my hand. When it gets to the end, you can grab it, you can pull it at the end, it's going to be fine. You can also use a push stick. It's going. Use a paddle and a push stick, and you go. And you'll notice this push stick here has a lot of cuts in it. That's because it was used. This is what we want cut. This is what we don't want cut. So you're going to be using a push stick, push it in. I've on these gave you the examples using the paddle to hold it. We also have a feather board, which is my preferred method of doing it. When I'm running it through, this goes in the miter slot, turns. You can adjust it. You want it just at the blade or just slightly in front. This puts pressure right where it's cutting. This is going to hold this board against the fence, and you're going to be able to guide it, and you're going to go through, and you're going to be able to use a push stick on there, and it's going to make a really nice cut. I find it for myself, I find this is the easiest way to hold it. A lot of people do it without it. Give it a try if you haven't tried it. Okay. One last thing, because I only have 10 minutes, which I went over. I said the blade pushes against the thing. If I have a round piece of wood and I go to cut it, it's pushing right against here. It's no longer supported by the table. What happens, it can happen very likely, is this blade is going to grab this wood, it's going to fly up, and it's going to go and do things that you don't want it to do. Not only that, if you're holding it like this, when it pulls it, what's it going to do to your hand? It's going to pull your hand over into the blade. So it's a double thing that you don't want. So what can you do? You can build a cradle that this can go in like this. We're assuming this is round. Or I can take, if it's a bigger one, I can put it in some clamps and run it through. Then my hands are not in the way. It's being supported. This will hold this tight enough that it can cut on there and do that. One more thing on the resaw. You can use this style. If you're cutting thin, you've got the little catch there that you have a chance of getting. Okay, so that's all the time I've got. I will be in the shop after here if anybody has any more questions or wants to talk about anything, but that was my brief bandsaw safety. Thank you.